The views expressed on the following broadcasts do not necessarily reflect those of KHLT, Take 12 Radio, or our affiliates. The opinions on this show should not be considered as medical, psychological, or professional advice and are those of the host, co-host, and guest. Take 12 Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting are not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship.
God is a solution. God, the 12-step.
I like where he's going here.
Helps the community grow, helps us grow. Monty has done a phenomenal job.
And you're talking about taking people through a spiritual process, getting them into recovery.
Thanks, Monty, and thanks for all your support.
We need spirituality to make this thing work long term.
It's an absolute pleasure. He certainly knows a lot of people.
This is one of the places that is about the business of the solution.
And now, broadcasting on location somewhere in the vast expanse of the Pacific Northwest, it's the over-opinionated 12-stepologist, the Monty Man.
That's right. And welcome aboard, family. Welcome to all of you who are in recovery, those who are advocates of, and perhaps some of you should be. Welcome to another fine episode of the Take 12 Recovery Radio Show, broadcasting to you and for you from the studios of KHLT Recovery Broadcasting on the outskirts of beautiful downtown Albany, Oregon, here on the West Coast. Now, our email address, so you have that, get your pens and pencils out. It is Take12. That's the number 12, not the word. Take12radio@comcast.net. Also, if you are on our website at take12radio.com, you can subscribe on any of the podcasting platforms listed there, including our YouTube channel as well. Well, I don't normally do this because there is such a demand from Facebook and social media administrators to be on the show, and it tends to be a little overwhelming. So it's seldom that I bring an administrator of a Facebook group or an owner of a Facebook group on the show, but I felt prompted by the good Lord to do that this time. I'm very impressed by his Facebook group, and I want him to share his experience, strength, and hope, what it was like, what happened, what it's like today, and how this whole thing came to be, and what's going on with the Facebook group that is entitled Nate's Recovery Group. So with me in studio right now is Nathan Sugerman. Nate, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Monty. Thank you very much for having me. It's an honor and a privilege to be on this show. I enjoy your podcast greatly. And it's just, like I said, a privilege to be on the show.
Well,
Thank you very much.
I appreciate the work that you're doing. When we first get into recovery, some of us are pretty shaky. We have no idea, the work that God's got for us in the future to help give this thing away. And you're doing a fine job at part of your service commitment, obviously, is doing this Facebook group. But before we talk about Nate's Recovery Group, let's talk a little bit about Nate. So you probably weren't doing as well as you're doing today at one point in your life, true?
No, I wasn't, Monty. My journey started as far back as 1978. I got in a little trouble, and the police took me to a detox. And I didn't really even know what a detox was back then. And I was in pretty bad shape when they brought me in, and it was near night. And I slept through the night. And I came downstairs when I woke up in the morning to get a cup of coffee, and there was the AA meeting going on. So I sat in, and that was my first ever exposure to AA. I had a long and winding road to get where I'm at now. There was those years between 1978 and 1989 that I was forced to come to AA by mostly probation officers in the courts. And, like anybody else, I'm no dummy. I'd rather go to an AA meeting than sit in jail. So that's what I did. But I had no desire to stay sober. But, I did hear some things in those years. And it was 1989, and I had just gotten out of a period of time where out of 41 months, 36 of them, I was locked up in either county jail or a prison. I was in and out 2 times. I got paroled, and I violated the parole. Anyway, so at the meetings, I had heard that if you're in trouble with the courts, if you go to rehab, they'll go easy on you. So I was in a little trouble again with the courts after this 41 months. And it looked like I could be going back again. So right across the street where I lived was the Somerset County Alcoholism Department or office. And I went over there and I told them I want to go to rehab. And they got me into a rehab, which is pretty wide known here in Jersey, New Jersey. I'm from New Jersey, called Carrier Clinic. And when I got there, I didn't really want to stop drinking. I just didn't want to go to jail. Sure. And I had a really good counselor. And my counselor told me, you're not a bad guy trying to be good. You're a sick guy trying to get well. And I had always thought like I was a bad guy and God was getting even with me for all the stuff I pulled over the years. And when she said that, it broke through some intellectual wall I had in my mind. Plus, of course, all the things that the rehab tells you and about alcoholism and it's a disease, and just like diabetics need insulin and alcoholics, they need their medicine too. And our medicine is a higher power, God, the steps, meetings, helping others, being active in our fellowship, whether it's AA, NA, or whatever A. And so I was gung ho. By the time I left there, I wanted to get sober, and I came out and I got a sponsor and I joined a group. But I was still very young, and I made the mistake. Not the mistake, but just being a young kid, and I grew up in the '70s, so which you could probably relate to. The '60s era. And I mentioned at a meeting with a bunch of old timers, well, instead of sex, drugs, and rock and roll, now it's sex, AA, and rock and roll. And, they kind of hammered me for that at the meeting.
I'll bet.
And that was my attitude back then. I was so young that, and I still had a lot of wild oats in me. And, I made a lot of meetings, and my first sponsor was a big 12-step guy. I was on a lot of 12-step calls back when 12-step calls were very prevalent. And that kept me sober for a couple of years. But because I didn't change much inside, I relapsed. And then I went in and out for 6 years. And I came back, and I thought I had hit my bottom. And I stayed sober 11 years. And then I had another relapse. And by this time, I'm in Miami, Florida. And that's the relapse that almost killed me, literally and figuratively. Not only, was my life a mess. I had nothing, no money, no relationships, no job, no material possessions, no nothing. I started getting these vicious panic attacks. I mean, I literally thought I was dying with these panic attacks. I was sleeping on the streets because I have a big mouth when I'm drinking. I was getting in a lot of fights. Now, I'm pushing 50. And at that time, now I'm almost 60. There's no reason for me at that age to be getting in fights with anybody. And I was getting pretty beat up. And I was going in and out of Lee County Jail, Broward County Jail, Dade County Jail. And in between, I was staying at various Salvation Armies, one place called Faith Farm. And, because I didn't have insurance, so it was hard to get in a real rehab. And, I liked those places. At least I was staying out of trouble in those places. But, I would always get out and use again. And my last run wasn't really what I would call severe. It was severe emotionally more than physically. Or although there was a little pain physically, the consequences to me, I were used to them by now. It wasn't like I was going to prison or anything like that. My consequences were homelessness and not hardly any money. And my last day drinking, I was sitting by a bus bench in Aventura, Florida, drinking a beer with one hand and rubbing my stomach with the other because I was having shooting pains in my stomach.
Oh, wow.
And I got that moment of clarity. You know, some people only get that once. I've been lucky enough to get that a couple of times in my life. I got the moment of clarity that there's a better way. I know there's a better way because I lived the AA way, you know, for a long time, and it was a good life. And I says, you know, I'm not having any fun. It's very hard living on the streets. And you know, now I'm getting old enough where I'm getting all these physical problems from, you know, the panic attacks, the shooting pains, and all that. So it just so happened I didn't plan this out. I looked up, and you know, here's God for you. I was right across the street from Aventura Hospital. And I had known in my time in Miami, they didn't have a detox, but a nurse had told me a while back that if you tell us you have chest pains, that'll buy you 24 hours at the hospital. And I knew if I wanted to stop drinking, I needed at least 24 hours away from a drink. So I got that 24 hours, and that's all I got. They released me after a day, and I was still determined to stay sober, although I was homeless and had no money. And I got down to the neighborhood where I used to hang out, and I had an epiphany. It was almost, it felt like God was talking to me, although I didn't hear a voice. And some of the best ideas I've ever had in my life came to me. And I remembered things I had heard over the meetings over the years. One was this woman, Bernadette, used to say, today I choose character building over comfort. And years ago, I was on a run in New York City, and I decided to go to an AA meeting, and I thought they might take pity on me, give me some money or feed me or, you know, get me to a rehab or something. But I must have picked the wrong meeting because it was one of those tough love kind of meetings. And they didn't want to hear nothing about that. And the one guy talking to me, he pointed across the street, and there were like 20 young adults sitting on the curb. And he says, you see those guys over there? I go, yeah. He goes, they're all staying sober, but they're all homeless. And but they're staying sober and they're doing the right thing. And not many things in my life ever impressed me. You know, it's hard to impress an alcoholic, I think, at least me. And I never forgot that. I remembered that. Oh, that seemed like such a good thing to do, you know, a character building thing to do. And so those two thoughts kind of merged, the character building over comfort and the people staying sober, homeless. And I says, well, you know what? I'm not going to go to a rehab. I'm not going to try to go back to the Salvation Army or one of those kind of places, because all they had been up to that point in my life was an enabler. They cushioned my fall. They made my fall a lot easier than it should have been. And by this point, I had a joke with one of the guys I used to be in the Salvation Army after I turned 50, and he was also 50. In baseball, they had this thing called the 40-40 club, 40 home runs and 40 stolen bases. Well, we used to joke we were in the 50-50 club, 50 years old and 50 rehabs. And so I knew it wasn't going to do any good for me. You know, I could have counseled the counselors at this point. So I said, I'm going to stay homeless. And I really picked a good spot. I picked, there was an abandoned office building, was semi-abandoned. There were only like 2 businesses in it, but it had like 10 floors. It had a wraparound porch so it would protect me from the rain, and it was well hidden from the streets. A funny story, while I was going through this, I still had my sponsor in New Jersey, Brian F., a great guy, 33 years. And I was telling him, you know, about me being homeless, and he always assumed that I was in some kind of remote area. And about at 4 years, at the 3-year mark, I came back to Jersey. At 4 years during the pandemic, he has a home in Cape Coral. So we went down there for vacation, and we went to Miami so I could see my old friends in Miami, my sober friends. And I showed him where I was sleeping. And he says, oh my God, you were right on US 1. I thought you were like in a remote area somewhere. And it was Biscayne Boulevard, which is US 1 in Miami. And, but it was a good spot for me. Not only was it hidden and everything else and protected from the weather, The gym I belonged to was right across the street, so I stored what little belongings I had there, little few pairs of clothes and some hygiene products, and I would, brush my teeth there, shave, shower, and it was kind of sort of like my home base. And right around the corner from where I was sleeping was the AA clubhouse, so I didn't have to go far to go to meetings. And so, anyway, that's one of the decisions I made that day. And the second decision I made that day is after years and years of coming to AA, at this point, I have been coming to AA for 27 years. Now, I know it doesn't count really because it wasn't continuous, but I did have sober experience. And I was sober, 25 out of those 27 years, if you added up all the days. And near the end of that, the last few years, I had been thinking that not only do I need to do everything AA tells me to do, I need something else I can do to help humanity as a whole. Whether it's like I thought about people like Eric Clapton or famous people who started rehabs or were very involved in their communities in some way. But I didn't have any money, so that was out. And I had just, believe it or not, I don't think I told you this yet. The beginning of that last run, like 2 weeks prior to that, I put on Facebook that I'm on South Beach. I had broken my sobriety. I had like 90 days at that point. And now this is before I came to these great epiphanies and everything. And I posted that I'm on South Beach. I just drank 2 6-packs of Corona, a pint of Jack Daniels, and I'm going to Little Haiti to smoke crack. And now at this point in my Facebook activities, I don't know, Facebook started a few years prior to that. This was 2016 now. And I was in a thing called classmates.com. And when I joined Facebook, all my classmate friends came over. And this was all people I went to high school, I graduated with, who all thought I was doing great in Florida. And they're all reading this. And they're like, I'm getting replies. Is this a joke? I'm coming down there to get you. And, they were very concerned about my well-being. And so, when I got sober and I made the decision, I'm going to stay sober this time, I was like really humiliated and disturbed by posting that. And I said, I got to let these guys know I'm doing well. And I'm headed on the right track. And so the thought of Eric Clapton and his rehabs and me doing something extra and me telling my friends that I'm doing okay gave me the idea. At first, it started out as like a blog. And day 2 was my first post. And I remember exactly what I wrote. I said, this might be the smartest thing anybody ever did or the stupidest thing anybody ever did. But I'm going to have a running blog on here charting my progress or lack thereof. And I'm not sure what's going to happen, but I'll tell you one thing, it's going to help me stay sober. Because, I told them also they were going to be my accountability partners. Because at this point, I had no friends anywhere, especially where I was living down there in South Florida. So I'm going to take a breath because I don't know if you want to chime in or you want me to keep going.
So we want to talk about this whole Facebook and social media experience and how it's helped you and how it can help others here in a minute. So let me rewind a little bit. Do you have a history of alcoholism in your family that you know of?
Yes, I was actually adopted from birth, and for years and years and years knew nothing about my history. And at the age 40, I found my real family. And my brother was one of the people I found. And he says, boy, you're lucky you got adopted. We had it rough as a kid. Mom was drinking and we were living in a van. And I had a nice upbringing. I got raised by a middle class family. My father was a school principal and my mother was a housewife. But I found out the history of a heavy history of drug and alcohol abuse in my family.
Yeah. Well, I suspect that is the case in most cases when it comes to alcoholism and other addictive behaviors and so forth. So Yeah, it's interesting. We have that in common. I too was adopted. I was never able to find.
Oh, wow.
I was never able to find my birth parents because it was a closed adoption out of California, and they're a tough nut to crack. They won't budge when it comes to closed adoptions. And I mean, I just wanted to find out just for medical reasons, for my kids,
Yes.
right? But we never did find out. So, we just, we trust God and love each other and keep moving forward. So congratulations, by the way, on being above ground and still sucking air, man, because the truth of the matter is the statistics are not good when it comes to longevity with untreated alcoholism. And so you got into this marvelous 12-step fellowship. You started applying and implementing the spiritual disciplines. You got yourself a sponsor. How important, Nate, is it for a person in recovery to have an accountability of a sponsor? How important is that?
Oh, it's vital. For one thing, one of the most important things about staying sober is going through the steps. And I've heard it described as like if you're going on a safari or a tour guide or a tour, you have a tour guide that, it shows you, make sure you don't walk where the alligators are or the lions or whatever, And to me, that's kind of what a sponsor is. He takes me through the steps. He explains the steps to me. He helps me with suggestions about how I make amends or what I should do in certain situations in every area of my life. And I still talk with my sponsor just about every day, even though I'm sober a little over 6 years, which is not a whole lot of time. But, a lot of people might not talk to their sponsors that much. I don't know, but that's neither here nor there. And just a real cool story here. And how God is in charge of this whole thing. I was after I had gotten on my feet, after I got sober, and my first 48 days were homeless. But in that period of time, I found a home group, a great home group. I recommend it to anybody. The Bal Harbor group of Miami. It's just was people, wonderful people at Bal Harbor. I call them. They saved my life. And I got involved with the group. But for months, I was still using my sponsor from New Jersey. And I was making the coffee at the meeting. And by the way, the coffee maker never gets drunk. And I made the coffee there for 3 years. And this group met 3 times a week. So this was, I had to do it 3 times a week. So it was a big job. Anyway, but I loved every minute of it, and it helped me stay sober. But so I'm there early one day, and there was another member there, Chad. And Chad goes to me, Nate, do you have a sponsor? And I go, yes. He goes, do you have a local sponsor? And I go, no. Why, you applying for the job? And he goes, no, but I think you should get a local sponsor. So it's one of those stories where, like, well, if one person says you're a duck, maybe you're not a duck. But then if 2 people tell you you're a duck, you're a duck.
Right.
Well, 2 days later, I'm talking with Brian up here in New Jersey, my sponsor up here. And I don't tell him anything about this story about Chad or asking about if I have a sponsor or not. And Brian says, you should really think about getting a local sponsor down there. And I said, I must be a duck. It's 2 people telling me.
There you go.
So I had 2 guys in mind in my home group. And I said, the first guy that answers the phone gets the job. And Mark answered the phone. And he became my sponsor. And at this is the cool part of the story. One of our first talks together, I figured I better give him a little background on me just so he knows where I'm coming from and how I am. And, I told him I'm adopted from birth. I says I wasn't born Jewish, but I was adopted by a Jewish family from birth. And he goes, no way. He says the exact same thing happened to me. I was not born Jewish, and I was adopted by birth by a Jewish family. And I was like, oh, my God. And, there's certain things which,
right.
You could relate to too. Maybe that's why we get along. The adopted from birth people got a lot of the same characteristics and things that they're dealing with. So yes, he was and he took me through the steps. And he took me through the steps very aggressively. Like there's a few ways of thinking about it across the country or the world about how to do the steps. Some people say take it slow. Some people say do it right away, so on and so forth. But so at one of our first meetings we're at together, I says, Mark, I think I'm on step 4. I'm pretty good with the first 3 steps. Mark goes, no, you're not. You're on step 1, and you're going to meet me once a week, and we're going to do a step a week till we get through the steps. And that's what we did.
Wow.
And it was, and you know, this God had played a huge role in this. He, you know,
yeah.
Who do I know to ask to be a sponsor? I still were barely
Right.
getting to know these people.
Right.
And put the perfect guy in my life, and it was such a blessing.
That is a great story. That is a great story. Okay, we're gonna take a short break, and after the break, we're gonna come back and we're gonna talk about Nate's Recovery Group, the Facebook page and group on social media. So don't go away, my friends. More with Nate Sugerman when we return.
Hello, this is Dan Banks. And this is Matt Baxley, and you are listening to Take12Radio.com. Recovery talk and positive music.
Hey everybody, it's the Monty Man. I am so grateful for our good friend, Dr. Alan Berger, author of 12 Stupid Things That Mess Up Recovery, for really showing me the path to emotional sobriety. You know, the ability to be comfortable in your own skin regardless of other people's behavior or the things that are going on around you. Well, Dr. Berger has a brand new book that really digs even deeper into this topic of emotional sobriety. The book, 12 Essential Insights for Emotional Sobriety. Listen, we all need some really powerful tools in our arsenal against getting stuck in our recovery. And this is one you do not want to be without. 12 Essential Insights for Emotional Sobriety can be purchased at abphd.com. Also available on Amazon.
This is Tony Morosi from the recovery band Self-Esteem, and we're listening to the Take 12 Recovery Radio Show on KHLT Broadcasting.
Thank you, Tony. All right, welcome back to the show. You've tuned in to the world's original and oldest recovery talk and positive music radio station and podcast, the Take 12 Recovery Radio Show. And with us today, this week, is Nate Sugerman. He is the administrator, owner of the Facebook group, Nate's Recovery Group. Now, Nate, you had said that you were looking for a way to give back, basically. And this whole idea of like starting out with a blog, sharing what you were going through on a daily basis, and using those who were joining up as an accountability source for you. And this thing has turned into something that has gone on for quite a while now. How long have you been doing it?
6 years.
6 years. Wow.
Yes, sir.
And you know, I would be remiss if I didn't do this. I'm going to give a shout out to a person that you and I both know, Mr. Tom Storms. And,
yes.
You know, we play his music on a pretty regular basis here at Take 12 Recovery Radio. Tom, hey, buddy, just God bless you, man. Thinking of you during this time as I'm visiting here with Nate. And so the reason I bring that up is not only because I'm very fond of him and his music, but it just shows how the recovery community, whatever you think of the internet, whatever you think of Zoom meetings, whatever you think of that whole thing, because there's a lot of critics out there. It's easy to criticize, right? The truth of the matter is this can be an incredible tool in our arsenal against active alcoholism, against active addiction. It really can. And we don't need to let it take us down. We can use it to build us up and to connect together with each other, because the more accountability we have with one another, the more far-reaching we are with one another, the more the fellowship grows, and the fellowship of the Spirit becomes powerful. And we have groups like your group, Nate's Recovery Group. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yes, without a doubt. I mean, in the first wave of my group, when it was mostly my friends that I went to high school with. After starting the group, I found out that a lot of them these days were sober, which was very great to hear.
Yeah.
And it has brought, like, for instance, about a year sober, doing this group for a year and going to meetings and everything else. And by the way, I want to say my going to meetings and being active in my 12-step community meetings is the most important thing to do. This group just helps me keep engaged in my recovery when I'm not actually at a meeting or, doing something that involves, the meetings and the recovery network. But it brought when I had a year, I came back. I finally figured out how to come back to New Jersey. I was trapped in South Florida for 10 years. I couldn't get out of there. And I wasn't sane enough to get out of there. Finally, I'm sober a year. I saved some money. I could afford to take a vacation, and I did. And the people in the group had a party for me. And some of these people hadn't seen each other since high school.
Wow.
And it really brought in some of my friends together. And now, as time has gone on, I'd say the last wave, the last couple hundred members, it's still a fairly small group. There's only 400, I think that last count, like 411 people in it. The last wave have all mostly been all sober people that I've met at meetings, or they heard about my group from somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing about the group is that I personally know over 90% of them. I've had life experiences with all of them. I know their families, their kids, I've been to their homes, I've been to many meetings with a lot of them. And they're just, it's a great group of people that are very, very active in their sobriety, and they're a great help with the group also. And just, you mentioned Tom. Tom was a part of my first sober network ever in 1989. I had just gotten sober for the first time. I had a friend, his name's Joe, and he was sober 5 years at that point. He was a childhood friend. He was the only one I knew in AA. So he brought me to my first few AA meetings. And we were at an AA anniversary meeting, a Thursday night meeting in my hometown of Somerville. And he pointed across the room and he says, "You see that guy over there? He'd make a great sponsor for you." And it was a man named Al. And he had the nickname of Jailhouse Al because he had spent like 15 years in jail in his addiction. He robbed a bank. He left us. He died about a decade ago. But he was a great man who helped a lot of people. And anyway, Tom was friends with Al. So whoever Al was hanging around with, because they said, stick in your sponsor's back pocket back then, they would tell you, Tom became my friend. And then I'd say 25 years ago, Tom moved away with him and his beautiful bride, Marty. And I didn't see Tom or hear from him or anything for 25 years. And during the pandemic, I was hosting a Sunday night Zoom meeting, and I asked my friend Sally to speak. Well, Sally's great friends with Tom's wife, Marty. So Marty jumped on the Zoom meeting and told Tom, and that's how me and Tom reconnected. And how I got on this podcast is for about a year and a half. You've been posting the podcast in the group. And I wasn't really, because I had no clue who you were or anything like that. And I would always put like, because if anything posted in my group, I always at least put a like. I acknowledge everyone, at least by that. But I never listened to any of your podcasts till like a couple of months ago. I'm like, I got curious one day. I said, "Who's this guy, Monty?" And I checked. You weren't a group member. I said, "How is he posting a podcast in this group without being a member?" And I suspected Tom Storms had something to do with it, because your podcast started showing up around the same time Tom joined the group. Because I keep a close eye on all this kind of stuff. I'm very observant. I think it's from my jail time, because
yeah,
could be people plotting to kill you. You got to be very aware of your surroundings.
Right.
Even I wasn't. I was just out of my element in jail. That's a whole nother story. And so I researched it, and I forget how. I think I must have got your number off a website, and or I messaged you or something, and then we talked, and boom, boom, boom. Now I'm on the podcast. And just one other thing I'd like to say about it. I feel like you're a kindred spirit, because not only, I was raised by a Jewish family, but I never really took to Judaism. My last Jewish event really was my bar mitzvah, and the only reason I did that is because I knew I was going to get money, and not a good reason for you doing your bar mitzvah, I guess. But I was already a budding alcoholic at that point,
right?
And and as the time came on, I became a Christian, and I'm a born again Christian, and I love Jesus. And your podcast, from what I've heard, is sort of revolutionary. It's the first of its kind. And the group that I do, even though there are many, 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 many recovery groups on Facebook, it's all random people just bunched in together because it's a group, Bill W's AA group or whatever, and people in sobriety, AA group, I'm going to join it, and but this group, and then various people, post in those groups. And there's a lot of arguments I see in those groups, and a lot of like that old timer mentality when like a newcomer will say something, and instead of coming at them with love, they come at them with like, oh, what are you talking about?
Right.
Or whatever. And so and the group I run, I've been generating, pretty much I do a recovery post. The first year was every day. I didn't miss one day. And then, of course, life got busy. But I always at least 2, 3, 4, 5, sometimes more a week, and they're fairly lengthy. I'm working on shortening them, because whenever I see a long post on Facebook, I don't have the patience to read them. So I'm trying to shorten them a little bit so the people get the full effect. But I'm like such a storyteller. I want to tell the whole story, as you probably could tell, so everybody understands the point that I'm trying to make. And so it's a very different group. Before I knew about any kind of AA groups on Facebook or any of that, I started the group I did. I didn't even know people did this, and I mentioned in the early days that this was a revolutionary group. There's no other one like it. And that wasn't like my ego talking. It was just the fact of it was different. And I did it because it was do or die time for me. I knew if I didn't do something drastic, I was going to die. And I was lucky I hadn't died yet, like you said earlier. It was only by the grace of God that I'm still walking the earth. And if God was so great to me and so gracious to me to let me live, the least I could do is try my best at whatever I can to help his children. And, AA provides the perfect platform for that. We're able to help so many people coming into the meeting rooms who are new and broken and don't know what to do with their lives, and many contemplating suicide. And at 90 days, they're a whole different person. You see a big smile on their face. They're glowing and they're happy. And, this group just provides me on Facebook. This group just provides me with an extra opportunity to give back. And I can't give back enough for all God has done for me.
You mentioned that your group on Facebook may not be the largest one out there with 400 plus members. But one thing I know for sure is large numbers don't always mean quality, right? I mean, I've gone to some churches that were what we would refer to as mega churches, but the individual spiritual growth may not be as powerful as the amount of members going to the church. I would rather see a smaller group of folks who are really plugging in, who are walking the talk and who are sharing what they're walking, who are incorporating their experience, strength, and hope with other people and doing it on a regular basis and following the directions, if you will, the spiritual principles in the literature that are really doing the deal than huge numbers of people that are just clicking. I mean, social media is filled with people that are just clicking, but they're not tuning in. And it's obvious in your group that people are active. And that's what's great. I mean, there's a variety of people all the time. It isn't always just the same people. That's another good sign as well. I really like what you said earlier. You quoted that lady. You said character building over comfort. What a great quote. And I think that when people get active in social media in a positive way, as it is with Nate's recovery group, we can challenge each other with character building. We can challenge each other in a way that's palatable and not offensive, but where we can read something and consider what's being said there. I love the way you post. You start out with the day, right? Why do you do that? Why do you put days, whatever?
Well, it all started with day one. It was really day two, because I was charting I was actually charting my homelessness at that time. I said I was only going to do it till I got unhomeless. So, it was like the second day of being homeless and sober, the third day,
Yeah.
And finally I got unhomeless, but I originally said I'm going to stop the group when I get unhomeless, but I seem to be benefiting so much from it, and others liked it so much, I just kept on doing it. And it was one of those things, sometimes I think of wiping that part out, because I always start out with day whatever, another day starting out clean and sober. Now I can't even remember what I write every day. But morning post, whatever. I just to shorten it, I was thinking of, because I said they're kind of long sometimes, to just stop doing that. But it's one of those, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And I've always been doing it, and it always seems to have been working. So I just kept on going, and every now and then, so somebody will come up to me, hey, what day are you on now? And it's actually, well, what's true about it is it's the actually amount of days I'm sober.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I love
this group started the day I got sober. So,
yeah, I love it. Well, what a powerful way to give back. And I just want to say congratulations to you for doing so. Sometimes those of us in our 12-step complain about your day meetings. We can get a little dogmatic about what service work is, and there's this mistaken belief that service is limited to the fellowship that you're in. Service, yeah, I mean, you want to serve in the fellowship, you want to give back there, but true recovery, living in it, really demands that you serve on the public level, that you go outside the rooms, and that you are sharing your experience, strength, and hope in whatever capacity a person does that in a healthy manner outside the rooms, because that's where life is. And after all, one of the reasons that we got into this thing was to learn how to become productive members of society again, not just productive members of the meeting room, but in the world. And social media lends itself to be able to do that. We have an opportunity here to take something that really could be used as a negative, and sometimes is, and flip it on its head and use it for the cause of good, for healthy spiritual content, and to help people grow in their recovery. So congratulations on Nate's recovery group, Nate. I appreciate it so very much.
Yeah, and the AA literature even has it in there. It talks about, after we're sober a while, getting back involved with our communities, or our various churches. We're not only here to help. Our main goal, or our main purpose, is to help the suffering alcoholic and or addict but we're also here to help mankind as best we can.
Yeah.
And I just a quick couple of little things I wanted to say. I got a good kick at it. This is another reason I think we're sort of kindred spirits. You told me about your fire pit meeting, because of the pandemic.
Right.
And when we were at, I don't know what it was, March 12th, 13th, 2020, whenever it was that this whole thing blew up. And we were at a meeting, and I got a notification on my phone that our governor just shut the state down. And me and Rob, you just became friends with him on Facebook. He actually commented on something you wrote today, I think. Rob Lavornier, he says, when he heard that, he said, screw that, I'm having a meeting at my house. And he did. And that meeting by Memorial Day of that first pandemic year, so that was like within 2 months, we had a backyard meeting at somebody's house every day of the week. And because, the churches all kicked us out, so we couldn't go to the churches anymore. And there was no place to meet. And, Zoom was good, and Zoom, helped many, many people. And I will never say nothing bad. One reason I love Zoom is I get to join my Miami home group because they go live, but they also Zoom it. And I could join their group without being in Miami. So I love that part of it.
Yeah.
But a whole bunch of us wanted to be with each other and still have, the common contact with our fellow alcoholics. And so I had our meetings, and it was just a wonderful experience. One of the best experiences of my life. And it developed into, we had events, and we would go bowling, and we went snow tubing and camping and kayaking, you name it, we pretty much did it. And we're still a very close group now that all the meetings are open. Most of the time when we get to the meeting, we all, those are the first people that we seek out, the people that we wrote out the pandemic with. So it's just a wonderful experience.
That's great. That's great. I love hearing things like this. Let me see here. One of the things that you said very early on in the interview was in your nudge of the judge experience, going to meetings because the courts kind of pushed you in that direction, right? Would you say that even though that's kind of how you got there, that seeds were being planted right off the bat and you didn't know it?
Oh, yes. I think that was, God getting me where he knew I was going to finally end up.
Yeah.
Because once I made up my mind to get sober, very early on, even though I ended up relapsing a couple of times after that, very early on, I knew that AA was, or NA, but I chose AA. AA was going to be the only place in the world that I could go to that I was going to have a normal life. Without AA, there was no way I was going to be able to have a normal life and being sober. And that was my only way. It got so bad when I was relapsing, I had one goal: don't die, because I knew I was hopefully eventually getting back to AA. And that I highly, years ago, they used to give away motor vehicle cards. I'm an advocate of whatever gets the person through the door. Let's get them in there.
Amen.
Because even if set against getting sober, you never know what's going to stick.
Amen. And the reason I bring that whole thing up about seeds getting planted is there is a school of thought of some folks who think it's a darn shame that people come in here because the courts sent them there or treatment sent them there. I don't care why you're there. I just thank God that you're there, because you may be the next person that carries the message and saves somebody's life that ends up being a huge impact on our world. So never, ever, ever discount somebody being there, regardless of what got them there. Who cares? God isn't hindered by that, and we shouldn't be either. Well, Nate, we're going to link your Facebook group up on our main website while the interview's up. And then we're also going to link it up, listeners, on our recovery resource page. So if you go to our recovery resource page and just look for Nate's Recovery Group and click on it, that'll take you right to his Facebook group, and you can check that out and request membership in that. I would encourage it. It's an encouraging group. It's got a positive tone to it. And Nate, you do a great job of administrating it, buddy.
Thank you so much, Monty. Thank you very much.
So we're going to do a closing.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We're going to do a closing song here. But before we do, any closing thoughts from you?
We talked about a lot. We covered a lot of ground. I mean, I just so enjoy listening to your podcast. It's uplifting. It lifts my spirit. And I'm loving this, the walk through the language of the heart with Chris. He's great. Some of these stories he's telling is cracking me up. And it's just so informative and uplifting. And it's I enjoy it. And to be on your podcast is just, and I know you don't normally do this, so I really appreciate the fact that you were drawn by the Spirit, to have me on.
You bet.
Great honor and privilege, and actually helps me with my own spirituality.
Amen. Well, thank you so much, my friend. Okay, stick with me here, and we'll come back and we'll close out. And when we do close out, don't disconnect, because the show's got to upload, and I'll tell you when that I can release you back into the universe. All right.
Okay.
Our closing song is by recovery recording artist Steve Dan Mills, and it's entitled Inside Out Looking In. It's that feeling that you have when you don't feel part of anything, and you're on the outside looking in, and your guts are just inside out. That is a horrible feeling, and I will tell you, one of the ways that you can remedy that is being plugged in to a group of people that are growing spiritually. A prime example is fellowships like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, Celebrate Recovery, Alcoholics for Christ. There's just an enormous amount of groups out there. There's no reason to walk through life feeling like you are on the inside out looking in. Here is Steve Dan Mills.
I'm inside out, outside looking in. No matter where I go, I can't escape my skin. I can act cool, and I can act proud. No matter how I act, I'm still alone in a crowd. Inside out, on the outside looking in. Well, I signed up with the Cub Scouts. I went out for the team. I dressed the dress and I talked the talk of the preppies, jocks and freaks. That sense of true belonging did not belong to me. So I found my place in the fantasy of how great one day I'd be. I was inside out, on the outside looking in. I'm inside out, outside looking in. No matter where I go, I can't escape my skin. I can act cool, and I can act proud. No matter how I act, I'm still alone in a crowd. Inside out, on the outside looking in. I tried to be in love when I was much too young. I could not match my actions with the words on my tongue. So I went through several versions of my cold and hostile mom. They all swore I was too distant, and in the distance they were gone. And I was inside out, on the outside looking in. I'm inside out, outside looking in. No matter where I go, I can't escape my skin. outside looking in. I found the great equalizer, substance quick and warm, made me feel like Wonder Boy, eloquently adorned. But that word moderation was for years beyond my speech. There's a time bomb of emotion stuffed inside of me, and I'm inside out, on the outside looking in. I'm inside out, outside looking in. No matter where I go, I can't escape my skin. I can act cool, I can act proud. No matter how I act, I'm still alone in the crowd. Inside out, on the outside looking in. Inside out, looking in.
Steve Dan Mills. For more of Steve's recovery-focused music, visit his website at stevedanmills.com. A special thank you to our guest this week, Nathan Sugerman, the administrator and owner of Nate's Recovery Group. Just search for Nate's Recovery Group on Facebook and you'll find it, or you can click on the links here at Take 12 Recovery Radio at take12radio.com. Nate, thank you, my friend.
Thank you so much, Monty.
All right, God bless you, brother, and power on with Nate's Recovery Group. Until our next broadcast, this is the Monty Man, along with the rest of the Take 12 Recovery Radio family, and we are wishing God's perfect serenity for you.
This has been a broadcast of Take 12 Recovery Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting.
Kitty, 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 kitty.